If you think a father can disappear from your life without leaving a single explanation, then you don't know my father. I used to believe that no matter how much he hated me, he wouldn't abandon me in the darkest moment of my life. But I was wrong. Not because he hated me, but because he no longer even thought of me. Everything started falling apart right after the board meeting, the one where I claimed what should have been mine. From that moment on, my father went silent as if I had never existed. And that silence was more brutal than any insult could ever be. No. I'm Lilia Clark, 34 years old, living in Seattle. I used to be the only daughter of Richard Clark, the chairman of Clark Tech, a prominent tech empire on the west coast of the U.S. Used to be, because now he acts as if I was never his blood. I waited for his call. After that fateful meeting, where I won through my own merit, not my last name, I waited for 2 weeks. No messages, no emails, no follow-up invitations. All communication was cut off, as if I had been erased from the very system I helped build. The rational part of me said, he's just angry. He needs time. But the rest? The part that grew up under his shadow, knew better. No one stays silent like Richard Clark unless they intend to bury something. I didn't know exactly what made him so furious. Was it because I challenged his investment plan in front of the board? Or because I publicly questioned financial transparency? Maybe it was simply because I, a woman, dared to stand up and reclaim the executive role I rightfully deserved. But what I couldn't accept, couldn't forgive, was how he discarded me. As if I were a mistake he never wanted to acknowledge. My father was the kind of man who could silence an entire room with a single look. In his tailored Italian gray suit, with a deep voice and words chosen with surgical precision, he was considered the embodiment of cold control and success. He never said I love you, but I used to believe that one day, if I were strong enough, good enough, he'd finally acknowledge me. I lost my mother when I was 16. From then on, I lived with him. No hugs, no late-night talks, no birthday parties at home. Just punctual family meetings, dinners that felt like job interviews, and lessons that sounded like commands. Strangely, after all those years, I still waited for that one moment when his eyes might soften while looking at me, a nod, a simple word, good. But it never came. Silence was his weapon. I remember clearly the day of that board meeting, Friday, the first week of October. I stood in the glass-walled room on the 23rd floor, facing the entire board, and said out loud what everyone else had been too afraid to. I exposed a shady investment in a satellite company run by one of his longtime friends. I presented a report showing poor performance and a high risk of loss, and when I finished, the room went silent, like a chapel. He said nothing, just stared at me, cold, unmoving. I thought afterward he would call me into his office, scold me, punish me, something, but no. He walked away and from that day forward, disappeared. I don't know if I won or lost in that moment. All I know is that from that day on, I was no longer Richard Clark's daughter. At least, not in his eyes. What I didn't expect was that his silence would last. Not just with me. Even the board received nothing from him. Everything tied to him, documents, meetings, financial records, was suddenly frozen. As if he was hiding, preparing for some major move. The longer I waited, the angrier I became. Not because he hated me, but because he refused to speak, refused to explain, refused to be present. You can confront someone who hates you, but you can't fight silence, especially when it comes from the one who's supposed to love you most. I stopped waiting for his call. 2 months had passed since that fateful meeting. I had resigned, walked away from the building that once bore my family name like a crown, shutting down each memory with cold, robotic clicks. I started over, a small company, a few staff, a modest office rented in Fremont, Seattle. Every morning I walked in like I had never been the executive of a billion-dollar corporation. I no longer spoke of my father. I stopped making excuses, that he was busy, that he was thinking, or that he would reach out once he cooled off. Or learn to accept the truth. Some people will abandon you, even those who share your blood. But then, on a quiet Sunday morning, I opened my office door and saw him. No bodyguards, no assistants, no secretary standing beside him like always. Just a man in his 60s, wearing a light gray overcoat, sitting upright at my oak desk, the one I had just bought from a second-hand store. I froze in the doorway, still holding a latte I hadn't yet sipped. My heart raced, but not from fear, from disbelief that he had come. He looked at me, his eyes almost unchanged from the last time. Cold, firm, unreadable. I walked in, the glass door closed behind me with a soft click. I pulled out the chair and sat across from him without saying a word. I wasn't sure if this was a confrontation or a trap, but I knew that this time, I wouldn't back down. My father spoke first. His voice was deep, slow, without any clear emotion. "You didn't burn this place down?" I narrowed my eyes but said nothing. He glanced around, the abstract blue painting on the wall, the empty shelves, the whiteboard with a few half-written lines from yesterday. A simple space, but it had a soul. Mine. "You could have destroyed everything," he continued, "but instead, you fixed it." The words hung in the air. Not a compliment, certainly not an apology, but enough to make me pause. "I didn't destroy anything," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I just exposed the truth." "And you think the truth was worth risking everything?" he asked. I let out a laugh, without joy. "Everything? You mean a temporary title, or the father-daughter relationship that's been empty for years?" His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't respond. I continued slowly. "Do you know what hurt me the most? Not being removed from the executive board. Not watching someone else take the position I built from the ground up. It was that you didn't even bother to see me as a person. You didn't call. You didn't ask. You didn't even try to talk." Silence. I didn't avoid his gaze. I used to when I was a child, when he yelled when he was disappointed, but not anymore. I've learned that only the guilty avoid eye contact. Finally, he leaned back, hands clasped together. Something in his expression softened, just for a moment. "I got too used to controlling everything," he said, "so much so I didn't know what to do when something fell out of my hands." I looked at him. It was the first time I had ever heard my father admit to any weakness. "You've proven your ability," he continued. "Without the name, without the legacy, just by being yourself." Part of me wanted to react, to ask why it took such a shock, such silence, to hear even a whisper of acknowledgement. But the rest of me just felt tired. "So why are you here?" I asked. "Just to tell me I'm good?" He hesitated. "The company needs a new member on the supervisory board, someone with an independent vision. Someone I believe won't back down because of family ties." I let out a soft, honest laugh. "So you came to hire me?" "Not to hire," he said, "to invite." I stood up, looked him in the eye. "I'll think about it, but you need to know, I'm not that 17-year-old girl waiting for your approval anymore. If I come back, it's because I believe I can do it, not because you want me to." He nodded slightly, then stood up. No hug, no handshake, no goodbye, but he had come, he had spoken, and for the first time in many years, I saw him, not as Richard Clark, the powerful CEO, but as an aging father, trying to reclaim something he had lost. I couldn't sleep that night. After meeting with my father, my mind felt like a maze with no exit. The things he said weren't clear, but they stirred up old questions I had long buried. Had he ever been proud of me? Was I just a pawn in his long-term strategy? Monday morning, I sent him an email, just a short message. "If you want a real conversation, not as CEO and former executive, but as father and daughter, then meet me at noon today, Cafe No. 7 on Pine Street. No secretary, no entourage, just you and me." 11:59, he walked in, alone. I was already seated, a half-cold Americano in front of me. The glass door trembled slightly as he closed it behind him. This time he seemed slower, not because of age, but because he was stepping into a conversation he couldn't fully control. I pointed to the seat across from me. I'm not going to dance around things, I said as he sat down. If you plan to come back into my life as if nothing happened, then you should know I'm not starting from the beginning anymore. He nodded. No reaction, no anger. Silent. Like a man listening to the verdict of his own life. Since I was little, I continued, I always thought you were strong. The kind of person who was never wrong. You taught me to be cold, to calculate, to be better than others. And I did that. But you forgot to teach me one thing. I looked him straight in the eyes. How to live when there's nothing left to prove. He lowered his head, his faded eyes reflecting exhaustion, a rare expression. I know, he said softly. I controlled everything. Even you. I thought if you followed the path I laid out, you'd be safe. You wouldn't be hurt like your mother was. I let out a breath. That was the first time in years he had mentioned my mother, the woman he loved, but lost through prolonged coldness. But you didn't protect anyone, I said. Mom left in silence. I grew up between 4 rigid walls and invisible rules. Did you ever think about what it's like for a child to never know what a real hug feels like? Silence. I didn't want to cry, but my throat started to tighten. I had grown up, rebuilt my life after he turned his back. I didn't need an apology. I just wanted to be seen as a human being. Finally, he looked up, his voice low and calm. I'm not good at loving. I'm good at building, fighting, managing. But I don't know how to be a father. I looked at him, no blame, no pity. Then be a father who learns how to listen, I said. I don't need you to manage my life anymore. If you want me back in any role, then I have conditions. He sat up straighter, his gray-brown eyes looked at me, no longer cold, but focused. Tell me. I took a deep breath. First, if I return to the supervisory board, you are not to interfere with my decisions. I will have an independent voice. He nodded. Second, I want to know the full truth about the suspicious investments over the past 3 years. No evasion, no detours. I want everything transparent. This time he was silent a few seconds longer. Okay. Third, I said, and this was the part I hesitated over. You have to do something I don't think you've ever done before. Admit your mistakes, publicly. His eyes shifted. To whom? He asked. To the company, the shareholders, and to me. Not for the media, but because you owe me that. I thought he would object, but he only said, hard but not impossible. I gently tightened my grip around the coffee cup. For the first time, he didn't avoid my demands, didn't dismiss them, didn't belittle them. Finally he asked, do you think it's too late to start over? I gave a small smile though my heart ached. No one starts from zero. We start again with what's left. He nodded, a deep, slow nod, no longer like a CEO, no longer like a domineering father, but like a man who knew he was wrong and was learning how to make it right. I returned to Clark Tech on a rainy Monday morning. Walking into the main lobby, once filled with dreams and disappointments, felt like unlocking an old house. Everything was familiar, yet something had undeniably changed. My new position, independent supervisor of the board. No direct executive power, but full authority to request reports, access data, and most importantly, to handpick my own team to analyze internal operations. I noticed the stairs as soon as I stepped off the elevator on the 23rd floor. Curious glances, skeptical eyes, and several people who avoided eye contact altogether. I understood. They saw me leave in silence, and now I had returned, personally invited by Richard Clark himself. To them, I might be a traitor, or just another piece in my father's next grand scheme. But I didn't come back to please anyone. The first meeting took place in the Crescent Room, the same boardroom that used to intimidate me when I was a young director. Now, I sat at the far end of the table, aligned with no faction, tied to no Clark legacy. I'm not here to revisit the past, I began. I have only one goal, transparency. If that makes some of you uncomfortable, I'm open to conversation, but I will not stay silent. A few heads turned, others kept staring at their laptops as if I didn't exist. That's fine, doubt is necessary, it keeps you sharp. In my first week, I requested all financial reports from the past 3 years. I didn't use internal staff. Instead, I brought in 2 new partners, Nina Torres, a financial investigator who had worked with multinational corporations, and Eli Morgan, a discreet cybersecurity expert I had collaborated with during a data leak case last year. Neither of them owed Richard Clark anything. That's why I trusted them. Nina was the first to notice something strange. In the list of secondary investments, she pointed to a nearly hidden name under remote tech partnerships. Cypress Bridge Ventures. This company appears 8 times in the reports, but there's no office address, no website, no clear executive listed, Nina said. Nearly 22 million USD was transferred to them over the past 2 years. I stared at the number in silence. 22 million, and no one on the board had ever mentioned it. Worse, no one had audited it. I'll authorize a retrieval of payment records, I said. We need to know who approved them. Eli got to work on the rest. With access to the internal network and email system, he began scanning for transactions and internal messages with keywords tied to Cypress Bridge. It'll take a few days to recover emails deleted from the primary system, he said, but I'm betting we'll find something. I nodded. Ever since I came back, I no longer believed in coincidence. That night I sat alone in my office, looking through the foggy glass toward the city lights. The ticking wall clock echoed like a heartbeat in my chest, calm, but far from settled. My father once said, "Power doesn't lie in the position, it lies in the willingness to look where others turn away." Now I understood, and I was looking straight at it. 2 days later, Eli pushed open my office door without knocking. That could only mean one of 2 things, either very bad news or something important. "I've recovered a batch of emails from the backup server," he said, placing a small USB drive on my desk. "And, Olivia? Your father wasn't the only one who knew about Cypress Bridge." I looked up from my screen, my palms suddenly cold. "Anyone else?" I asked. Eli stepped back, as if needing to give me space before drowning me in the truth. "Howard Briggs, Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and Monica Hale, Mr. Richards' executive assistant." I sank back into my chair. Monica? The woman who had quietly stood behind my father for the past 10 years? She was always discreet, proper, and nearly absolutely loyal. Ilya continued. "She was the one who prepared the transfer documents. But the final approval didn't come from your father. It was Howard." I shook my head, feeling like a piece of foundation I was standing on had just crumbled. "Is there correspondence between them?" I asked. "There is. A simple encrypted email chain, but enough to piece together the picture. They called it a strategic security fund, but there's no contract attached to any partnership. And one more thing." Eli hesitated. "I found a hidden file on Monica's old server." He opened his laptop and typed a few commands. A transfer analysis chart appeared on the screen, but the most chilling part was the line at the bottom. "To be approved by RC only if audit risk is contained. Otherwise, HB takes fall." I read the line over and over. RC was Richard Clark. HB was Howard Briggs. So my father knew, but still let Howard take the fall if something went wrong? God, I exhaled, eyes fixed on the screen. He knew everything. Eli nodded slightly. And he was willing to sacrifice a longtime associate to protect himself. I felt something inside me collapse. Whatever part of me still believed my father was changing, was trying to fix things, slipped away from that fragile hope. I stood up and walked to the window. The buildings outside still glowed quietly, the streets below buzzed with life like any other night. No one but me knew a financial conspiracy was waiting to explode beneath the shimmering shell of a tech empire. "Do we have enough evidence?" I asked. "Enough to launch an internal investigation," Eli replied. "And if you want, Enough to take it to federal financial authorities. I nodded, then turned to him. But first, I need to talk to Howard. The meeting room on the 24th floor was silent, just the hum of the air conditioner and the cold overhead lights. I sat at the head of the table, facing Howard Briggs. His face was tight, but he still held the composed professionalism that had made him my father's right-hand man for over a decade. "You know why I invited you here, don't you?" I asked, my voice low but firm. Howard nodded slowly. "I'm guessing it's about Cypress Bridge." I didn't answer. I simply pushed a printed file across the table, data recovered by Eli. Howard glanced at it, sighed, and leaned back. "You know, Olivia, I didn't start this. Your father had it all planned. Monica was just the messenger. But when things spun out of control, he told me to take the blame if something went wrong." I clenched my fists. "Why did you agree?" "Because I owed him. He saved my company from bankruptcy in 2006. I thought a promise was enough, but then I realized he never planned to stop." Howard lowered his head, his voice rasping. "You were the only one who dared to ask questions. I couldn't. I'd been in the system too long." I looked straight at him and something in me softened. "Are you ready to help me get to the bottom of this now?" He was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I'm ready." I stood up. "Good, because I'm not reporting this to the federal authorities, at least not yet. We'll start with a full audit." Howard looked up, surprised. "I don't want to destroy Clark Tech," I said. "I want to save it." I met my father again in his old office, the 25th floor, where every decision used to be handed down like law. He stood facing the window, late afternoon light stretching across the dark wood floor. "You found it, didn't you?" he said first, not turning around. I walked to the desk and placed the thick file on its polished surface. "Not just found it, I also know who is ready to take the fall for you." Richard Clark slowly turned, his face deeply lined, his eyes tired, but he didn't look away. "Everything I did was to protect this company." "No, you did it to protect your power," I replied, my voice steady, "and you used others as your shield." A long silence. "So what are you going to do now?" he asked. I looked straight at him, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a woman who knew who she was. "On taking your place, not for revenge, to clean up what you left behind." Richard said nothing, but for the first time I saw him nod, not with authority, but with acceptance. I turned, hand on the doorknob. Behind me he said only one thing. "Do better than I did, Olivia." I didn't look back. A year later, the name Clark Tech still appeared on the building's sign, but inside everything had changed. We shut down shady projects, restructured the board, and made financial reports public. Monica left after signing a voluntary cooperation agreement. Howard, now an internal advisor, became my most honest companion in our Wednesday morning roundtables. I didn't try to turn Clark Tech into the Olivia Clark brand. I just wanted it to be a place where the truth could be heard, not whispered behind closed doors. I still arrived early, brewed my own coffee, and read my own reports. But every time I looked out the 25th floor window, where I once saw my father stand for hours, I no longer saw his shadow, only me, and a path opening ahead. I didn't forgive him right away. But I chose not to let the past lead me. Because sometimes the only way to close an old chapter is to begin writing a new one with your own pen. Olivia's story isn't just about exposing the truth and rebuilding an empire. It's a reminder that sometimes what we need most isn't approval from the past but the courage to move forward without it. In real life, we may not choose where we come from, but we always have the power to decide where we go. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to carry the old weight along the road ahead. What do you think about Olivia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss more heartfelt stories about family and the lives behind closed doors.